She stood outside her own house, suitcase trembling in her hands. Her adopted children slammed the door in her face. One shouted, "We don't need you anymore." The neighborhood watched in stunned silence. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She simply whispered, "You'll understand soon." No one expected what would unfold next. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from so we can bring more stories like these. The alarm on the old digital clock crackled to life at 5:30 a.m. Its tired beep barely strong enough to cut through the quiet of the little house on Maple Street. Margaret Dawson's hand slid out from under her blanket, found the button by muscle memory, and silenced it with a soft tap. For a second, she lay there, staring at the ceiling, that same off-white paint she'd never had time or extra money to replace, the faint water stain in the corner from a storm 3 years back. Every morning there was a moment like the floorboards creaked under her feet as she walked to the bathroom. The mirror reflected a face the world might call tired, but there was more there. Lines that came from laughing and worrying, eyes that had seen grief and still chose softness, dark skin creased with age and effort and love. Late 50s, but some days it felt closer to 80. She tied her scarf firmer at the nape of her neck, washed her face, and smiled at her reflection. "Margaret, you still here," she whispered. "Still breathing, still got work to do." Downstairs, the house held the quiet hum of a life she had spent decades building. Family pictures lined the hallway. A younger Margaret with her late husband, Terrence, in first days of school, Halloween costumes, broken-tooth grins, middle school awkwardness, high school caps tossed into the air. Every frame was a story she'd bled for. In the kitchen, Margaret moved like she'd been born there. Frying pan out, eggs cracked, toast in the old toaster that sometimes stuck, coffee pot dripping its way toward barely enough to function. Her hands were fast but gentle. She hummed under her breath, some old gospel song her mama used to play on Sundays. The stove light cast a warm glow over the chipped countertops and the little sticky note she kept by the fridge. "Remember, you did your best. That's enough." She didn't always believe it, but she left it there anyway. She checked the clock again, almost 6:10. "All right, come on," she said to herself, flipping the eggs. "We got grown kids who still think breakfast magically appears." Right on cue, heavy footsteps thudded down the hallway upstairs. Then the bathroom door slammed. Margaret winced at the sound, but didn't say anything. She'd been told recently, more than once, that she was too sensitive. She set 3 plates on the table, one for herself, one for Jason, one for Emily. Jason, 23, had that stubborn, set-in-stone walk of a young man who thought the world owed him a break. Emily, 26, moved like she was always 10 minutes late to something important, even when she wasn't going anywhere. "Jason, M," Margaret called, her voice warm but firm. "Food's ready." Emily appeared first, phone in hand, thumbs flying across the screen. Her long black hair was twisted into a messy bun, and she wore leggings and an oversized sweatshirt like it was a uniform. "Morning, baby," Margaret said, sliding a plate in front of her. Emily dropped into the chair without so much as a glance. "There's no avocado?" she asked flatly, poking at the eggs. Margaret blinked. "We ain't had avocado money this week. Prices went up again." Emily sighed dramatically. "Mom, nobody eats regular toast anymore, and these eggs are like dry." "They fine," Margaret replied, a little more quickly than she meant to. "You can put some hot sauce on them." Emily rolled her eyes and reached for her phone again. Jason came down next, hoodie up, headphones around his neck, the faint smell of cologne and last night's cheap cologne and stale weed clinging to him despite the open window upstairs. "Hey, Beatty," Margaret said. "I made you eggs. Got turkey bacon too." He grabbed the plate, plopped into a chair, and grunted, "Okay." That was his version of good morning now. He used to climb into her lap and knock her glasses crooked, giving her sticky jelly kisses. Now she was lucky to get a syllable. Margaret sat with them, hands wrapped around her coffee mug, more for comfort than warmth. She watched the two of them eat without looking at her, screens glowing in front of their faces, forks scraping their plates. The sound of her little kitchen filled with everything but conversation. "So," she tried, "how'd the interview go yesterday, Jace?" He didn't look up. "Didn't go." "What you mean it didn't go? You said—" "They never confirmed the time. I'm not gonna chase nobody for a job that barely pays," he muttered. "We talked about this," she said softly. "You gotta start somewhere. You can't just sit and—" "Can we not do this right now?" he cut in, pushing his plate away. "It's too early for a lecture." Her shoulders dipped slightly. Emily glanced up, just long enough to join in. "Yeah, Mom," she said, scrolling. "You're always in talk mode. Just chill. We're adults." Margaret swallowed. Adults still got bills to pay. Emily didn't even blink. "And you still bring that up like we don't know." Jason stood up suddenly. "I'm gonna head out," he said. "It's not even 6:30, Margaret said. "You got somewhere to be?" "Maybe," he mumbled, sliding his hoodie all the way up. "Got things to do." Things. Always things. Never specifics. "Did you fill out that application Pastor Leonard told you about?" she asked quietly. Jason paused at the doorway, jaw tightening. "Why does everything gotta be about what I'm not doing?" he snapped. Margaret opened her mouth, then closed it. The words got stuck behind a wall of exhaustion. He sighed in annoyance and left, door slamming behind him. Emily gathered her plate and dropped it in the sink without rinsing. "I'm meeting friends later," she said. "Can you send me some money? My card's low." Margaret set her mug down. "Didn't I just pay your phone and light bill, Emily?" Emily shrugged. "Yeah, but that doesn't mean I don't have a life." "You work part-time, baby," Margaret said. "You barely clocking hours." "So, it's not like we're starving," Emily shot back. "You always acting like we're on the edge of homelessness or something." Margaret stared at her. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "You remember when I worked double shifts so y'all didn't go to bed hungry?" she asked softly. Emily sighed. "Mom, that was years ago. Can you please stop bringing up the struggle era? We're not there anymore." Margaret didn't respond right away, because in her chest, they were still there. The fear had never left. Late notices on bills, eviction threats, figuring out which bill could slide and which one meant lights off. She had shielded them from it as much as she could. Apparently, she'd done too good a job. "I'll see what I can do," Margaret said quietly. Emily smiled for the first time that morning, a brief, shallow smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thank you," she said quickly, already turning away. "You're the best. Love you." The way she said it, fast, distracted, made it sound like a line she'd been trained to deliver, not something she felt. Then she was gone too. The house fell quiet again. Margaret sat in the echo of their absence, the ticking clock suddenly too loud, the empty plates staring back at her like accusations. She took another sip of her coffee, now lukewarm. Her eyes drifted up to the framed pictures on the wall. Jason at age 4, gap-toothed and beaming, holding a toy truck almost as big as his torso. Emily at 7, missing front teeth, wearing a princess dress they'd found at a thrift shop, twirling like she owned the sun. They looked at the camera like she was their entire world. Tears stung her eyes. She blinked them back. "Kids grow up," she murmured to the empty kitchen. They change. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her boss at the diner. "Margaret, can you cover breakfast shift?" Linda called in sick again. "I'll give you extra hours." She stared at it for a second. Her feet ached already. Her back had been hurting all week. But bills didn't care about her back or her feet. She typed back, "I'll be there." She rinsed the dishes they'd left in the sink, humming to keep herself from thinking too much. She wiped the counters. She straightened the rug in the hallway. She picked up Jason's hoodie he'd dropped and hung it on the hook by the door. Even when they walked over her, she still picked up after them. Before she left for work, she stepped into the small living room, the one Terrence had painted himself before the cancer took him. She ran her hand over the arm of the couch, then over the mantel, where his picture still sat. "Hey, baby," she whispered to the photo. "You'd be proud of them. They just going through something." She didn't believe it all the way, but she wanted to. She grabbed her purse, checked for her keys, then stepped outside into the crisp morning air. As she locked the door, she noticed Mrs. Carol Reagan next door, watering her little row of flowers, in pajama pants and a robe. "Morning, Margaret," Carol called, frowning slightly. "You look tired, girl." Margaret laughed softly. "I am tired." Carol studied her for a moment. "How's Jason and Emily?" she asked. "Oh, they fine," Margaret answered automatically. "Just grown." Carol tilted her head. "You okay?" she asked gently. "I hear a lot of shouting in there lately." Margaret's smile faltered, just for a second. Then she pulled it back up, like a curtain over a broken window. "Kids grow up," she said, shrugging. "They change. I'm sure they'll settle down." But the pain was there, in the slight shake of her voice, in the way her eyes darted away. Carol didn't push. She just nodded. "Well, you know, if you ever need a break, my door's open," she said. "Come sit, have some tea, complain about these ungrateful children of yours." Margaret chuckled. "I might take you up on that one day." She waved and headed down the sidewalk. From behind her, the house looked peaceful, almost picture-perfect. A little worn, but sturdy. A home built on sacrifice and second chances. Margaret had no idea that before the sun set again, that house would break her heart. And that same house would also reveal who really belonged inside it. Margaret's shift at the diner dragged on longer than usual. The lunch crowd was heavier than expected, and by the time she hung up her apron at 3:45 p.m., her feet pulsed with a deep, aching throb she'd grown used to ignoring. She grabbed her purse, smiled at the new teenage hostess who always called her Miss Margaret, and stepped out into the Jason's music. She closed the door gently behind her, wincing at a particularly strong vibration that rattled a picture frame. "Jason," she called out. No answer. She stepped into the kitchen. The dishes she'd washed that morning were somehow dirty again. Plates with smeared sauce, cups with sticky rings, crumbs sprinkled across the counter like confetti. Margaret set her purse down and sighed. "Lord, give me patience." She rolled up her sleeves and quietly started washing dishes again. She always did the dishes. Always. While the water ran, her eyes drifted to an empty cookie jar. She had bought a pack earlier in the week. Not for herself. She barely ate sweets. But she liked having something around for the kids. Empty jar. No note. "No, thanks, Mom." She wiped the counter and made her way to the living room. Emily sat on the couch with her feet up, scrolling on her phone. A half-eaten sandwich lay on the coffee table, crumbs everywhere. "Hey, Mama," she said without looking up. "Can you hand me the remote?" Margaret looked around. The remote was on the far arm of the couch, inches from Emily's hand. "You can reach it, baby," Margaret said gently. Ugh, Emily stretched dramatically and grabbed it. "My back hurts." Margaret nodded. Maybe sit up straighter. That couch don't support your spine when you… Mama. Emily cut her off with a roll of her eyes. I'm fine. Geez. Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. Where's Jason? She asked quietly. Emily shrugged. In his room. He locked the door. Been weird all day. Margaret's stomach tightened. Locked the door? Yeah. Emily scrolled again. He said he needed privacy, whatever that means. Margaret's chest pinched with worry. Jason never locked doors growing up. Terrence used to say, doors stay open in this house. Secrets break families. But these days, Jason locked his door more often than not. Later in the evening, Margaret stepped out to retrieve the trash bin from the curb. Mrs. Reagan, in her slippers and floral robe, stood watering her flowers again, though the soil looked far too damp to need it. Hi, hon, Carol said softly. You got a minute? Margaret forced a smile. Sure. Carol hesitated before speaking, something rare for her. Earlier, I noticed Jason going through your mailbox. Margaret blinked. Mailbox? Carol nodded. He took a few envelopes out. Looked like bills. Margaret's pulse began to race. You sure? I know what a past due notice looks like, Margaret, Carol said gently. He stuffed them under his sweatshirt. Margaret exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Thank you for telling me. Carol squeezed her arm. You okay? Margaret nodded, but her eyes said otherwise. Kids go through phases, Margaret whispered. He just needs guidance. Carol didn't argue, but her silence felt like a warning. Inside, Margaret checked the little drawer under her nightstand, where she kept the last gift Terrence ever gave her, a simple gold bracelet, thin but precious. Her hands trembled as she felt around the drawer. Empty. She swallowed hard, checking again, pulling everything out. Empty. She closed her eyes. Terry, she whispered, holding the drawer open as if the bracelet might magically reappear. But it was gone. And she knew deep down, Jason had been in her room last night. She cooked dinner anyway. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind of meal that took time and love, the kind her kids used to run to the table for. Jason came down first, slamming the fridge door. Emily followed, sitting with her arms crossed. Margaret served them plates with the same tenderness she'd had since they were little. Jason poked the meatloaf. Why is it cold? It was hot 20 minutes ago, Margaret said. Y'all didn't come down. Well, maybe say something earlier, Emily mumbled. I did, Margaret said softly, 3 times. Jason shrugged. Whatever. They ate with the loud, impatient crunching of people who took food and the person who made it for granted. Halfway through dinner, Margaret tried again. You two okay? Y'all been distant lately. Jason kept chewing. Emily didn't look up. Margaret tried again. If something's wrong, you can tell me. Jason slammed his fork down. Mom, just stop, he snapped. Nobody is attacking you. Margaret froze. I'm not saying you are, she said carefully. I'm saying I care. Emily exhaled sharply. You're too sensitive, Mom. Always taking everything personal. Margaret blinked. You raised your voices. Jason stood up. Jesus, here we go. Emily added, You act like we don't do enough around here. Margaret stared at them, shocked. You don't help at all. Jason cut her off. Because you act like a victim all the time. Margaret's breath caught. Victim? Her? She who worked 3 jobs to feed them? Who skipped meals so they could have seconds? Who held them through fevers and breakups and nightmares? Who sold her wedding ring when they needed school supplies? Jason grabbed his plate. I'm eating in my room. Emily followed. Same. Margaret didn't move. She felt something crack inside. Something old, fragile, and deeply loved. Hours later, when the house finally went quiet, Margaret sat alone on the couch, arms wrapped around herself. The shadows in the room felt colder. The memories on the walls felt heavier. She whispered to herself, "I didn't raise them like this." Her voice shook. "I didn't." She thought about Carol Reagan's words. The missing bills, the missing bracelet, the locked doors, the lies, the disrespect, and something else, something heavier. A feeling that her children were slipping into a place where she no longer recognized them. She placed a hand over her heart. "Terry," she whispered into the empty room, "something's wrong with our babies." She didn't know how right she was. She didn't know how close the betrayal was. She didn't know that tomorrow everything would fall apart. Everything. The next day was supposed to be ordinary. Margaret woke before sunrise as always, the soft amber glow drifting across her modest living room. She stretched her aching knees, whispered a small prayer over her coffee, and forced a smile onto her tired face. Today will be better, she told herself. It had to be. Jason and Emily were still asleep. Margaret made breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, sausage, hoping the smell would soften whatever tension had been G. By the time the kids came downstairs, the plates were already cold. Emily wrinkled her nose. "Why's the toast soggy?" Jason didn't sit. He hovered, hands in his pockets, eyes shifting in a way Margaret didn't like. "You two need to eat before you go anywhere," she said gently. "Breakfast is important." "We're not staying," Jason snapped. "We need to talk." Margaret's stomach tightened. "About what?" Jason didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the front door and opened it. Margaret stared at him. "Why are you—" Then she froze. Because right outside, on the porch, was her old suitcase, the navy blue one she used when she went to Atlanta years ago, packed and zipped. Her heart faltered. Emily stepped beside Jason, arms crossed, face blank. "Mom," she began, voice cold as polished metal. "We're selling the house." Margaret blinked. "Come again?" Jason lifted his chin. "You need to move out. Today." Silence hit the room like a blow. Margaret's voice wavered. "Jason, Emily, what are you talking about?" Emily looked away, annoyed. "Look, we've been talking about this for a while. We're adults now. We need space, and we're tired of all this." "Oh, what?" Margaret whispered. Jason gestured around the room, dismissive. "You, the constant questions, the old routines, the stress, you slowing us down." Margaret felt the floor tilt beneath her. "I raised you," she said quietly. "I kept this house for you. Oh my God, Mom," Emily groaned. "You're so dramatic." Jason reached behind the door and pulled out a stack of papers, slapping them onto the coffee table. "Sign these," he said. "It'll transfer the property so we can sell it." Margaret stared at him. Her own son, her baby, the one she rocked to sleep after nightmares. Her voice trembled. "Why would I sign away my home?" Jason scoffed. "Because it's not your real home, it's ours." Emily added sharply, "We're your adopted kids. You're not even technically our mother." The words hit quicker than any slap. Margaret staggered back a step, gripping the edge of the chair to steady herself. Not your mother. Not your home. Not your family. She never imagined she'd hear that from the children she raised with every breath she had. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this." Jason pushed the suitcase closer with his foot. "The neighbors are watching. Don't make this a scene." Margaret glanced toward the window. He was right. Nobody stepped in. Nobody said a word. Emily opened the front door fully, letting the sunlight spill across Margaret's face. "It's time for you to go," she said quietly. "We have plans. We don't need you here." A tear slipped down Margaret's cheek. "Emily, I held your hand the day your mother left you at the hospital. You were 2. You didn't have a soul in this world." Emily's jaw tightened. "Well, I do now." Jason grabbed Margaret's arm, not harsh, but firm, and pulled her toward the door. "Stop making this harder," he muttered. "We're doing what's best for us." Margaret told back, voice cracking. "What about what's best for me?" Jason didn't blink. "That's not our problem." The sentence was a knife. He pushed the suitcase toward her again. "Take it," he said. "You can figure out somewhere to go." Margaret's breath turned shallow. Her chest tightened painfully. She looked at both of them, the children she had prayed for, protected, fed, clothed, held when they were sick, kissed when they were scared. Children she would have died for. Children who just shut her heart out like it meant nothing. "Please," her voice broke completely. "Please don't throw me away." Jason stepped back. Emily crossed her arms. Neither moved. Neither softened. Margaret slowly picked up the handle of her suitcase with a trembling hand. The metal felt colder than winter. She stepped outside. A wave of humiliation washed over her as the entire neighborhood pretended not to stare. One woman across the street, Denise, who Margaret once babysat for, closed her curtains quickly, as if ashamed. Others didn't bother. They watched openly, whispering behind hands, shaking heads, making quiet tisk sounds. Jason and Emily stood in the doorway like bouncers escorting someone out of a hotel. No sorrow, no hesitation, no love. When Margaret reached the bottom step, Jason said one final thing. "Don't try to come back, Mom. This is done." "Mom." He said it with a bitter twist in his voice. They shut the door. The sound echoed through her bones. Margaret stood on the walkway, suitcase beside her, surrounded by the judgment of strangers and the cold betrayal of the 2 people she loved most. For the first time in 30 years, she felt entirely alone. Her world had just shattered in public, loudly, cruelly, mercilessly. But fate was already sending someone her way, someone who would change everything. The air felt thinner on the porch. Margaret stood frozen on the walkway, one hand clinging to the suitcase handle like it was the only thing anchoring her to the ground. Her ears rang with the echo of the slamming door. "You're not even our real mother! We owe you nothing!" She tried to swallow, but her throat felt dry, like someone had scraped it with sandpaper. The weight of every year she'd poured into this house, into those children, pressed down on her shoulders all at once. Her knees trembled. For a second, she thought they might actually buckle. She glanced around, cheeks burning. Across the street, Mr. Parker pretended to adjust something on his car hood, but his eyes kept darting toward her. 2 teenage girls stood on their porch, clutching iced coffees, whispering. An older couple paused mid-walk with their dog, staring just a little too long. Not one person moved. Not one person said, "You all right, Margaret?" Not one. She forced in a breath and tried to straighten her spine. "Come on," she murmured to herself, voice barely a whisper. "You've been through worse. Keep standing." She took one shaky step down the walkway, then another. Each one felt like walking through water, thick and resistant. That's when the dark gray sedan pulled up at the curb. New model, clean, quiet engine, tinted windows. It rolled to a smooth stop right in front of her, and for a heartbeat, she wondered if someone had ordered a ride for her. But she hadn't called anyone. She barely knew how to use ride apps properly. The rear door opened. A man stepped out, late 40s, maybe early 50s, tall, brown hair with thoughtful streaks of gray, navy suit pressed sharp, tie perfectly knotted. He held a slim leather briefcase in one hand, and his eyes, hazel, alert, serious, found hers immediately. "Ms. Dawson," he called gently. Margaret's brows pulled together. "Yes," she replied cautiously. He walked toward her, careful, respectful, as if she might spook and bolt like a wounded animal. Up close, she could see small lines around his eyes, the kind that come from squinting at documents and maybe squeezing in tired smiles between long workdays. "I'm sorry to approach you like this." He extended a card. "My name is Daniel Pierce. I'm an attorney." Margaret stared at the card in her hand. Black letters. White background. Daniel Pierce, Pierce and Holloway Law Group, estate and trust specialist. Her heart skipped. "Attorney?" she echoed, voice faint. "Did I do something?" He shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am, you didn't do anything wrong. I've been trying to reach you for several weeks." She swallowed. "About what?" He glanced at the closed front door behind her, then at the watching neighbors. "Would you be more comfortable talking inside?" he asked softly. Margaret's laugh came out hollow. "They just put me out," she said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I see," he murmured. "Then we can talk here. It's important you hear this now." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope, worn at the edges, as if it had been handled carefully more than once. "This," he said, holding it out to her, "is from your late husband, Terrence Dawson." Her breath caught. She took the envelope with shaking hands, fingers tracing the handwriting on the front. "To my wife, Margaret. To be delivered if I'm no longer here to say all this myself." For a moment, the world blurred. Heat rose behind her eyes. For a second, she could almost feel his warm hand at the small of her back, the way he used to steady her when life felt too big. "Terrence," she whispered. Daniel's voice was gentle. "Before he passed, he worked with our firm to set up a trust," he explained. "A sealed trust. He insisted it not be activated until certain conditions were met." Margaret blinked through the forming tears. "Conditions?" she asked. What kind of conditions?" Daniel glanced briefly around again, then stepped slightly closer, lowering his voice. "Primarily your age and the mortgage status of this house," he said. "Once the last payment on the house cleared, and once you reached 58, the trust would be fully accessible." Margaret frowned. "I don't understand," she said. "We were always just scraping by. Terrence and I, we never had trust money." She almost laughed at the phrase. "We had ramen and overdue notices." Daniel nodded kindly. "He worked quietly," he said, "took extra shifts, started a small investment account on the side. It grew, more than he ever expected." He pulled out a set of printed statements and handed them to her. Her eyes scanned the page. Numbers. So many numbers. Her mind struggled to process them. "Is that how much I owe?" she asked weakly. Daniel's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. "No," he said. "That's how much you have." She blinked, looked again. The number had too many commas, too many zeros. She shook her head. This must be a mistake." "It's not," he said calmly. "This is your trust, in your name. Your husband structured everything so that you would be the primary heir and controller of all assets." Margaret swallowed hard. "My husband never told me," she whispered. Daniel nodded slowly. "He wanted to," he said, "but he also knew you. He worried you would give it all away for the kids before they were ready." His exact words were, he flipped open a folder, reading, "Margaret's heart is bigger than her bank account ever will be. I need to protect her from herself and from anyone who might. Her lip trembled. That man, she breathed, still taking care of me from the grave. Daniel nodded. There's more, he said. He pulled out another document, the house deed. This property is legally owned by you, he said, tapping the top line. Not jointly, solely. Your husband transferred it before he passed. Her heart pounded. They told me, she said slowly, that it was theirs now, that I had to sign it over. Daniel shook his head firmly. They lied, he said. They have no legal claim to this house, the trust, or any of your assets. Your adopted children are not beneficiaries. Terrence made that decision intentionally, not to punish them, but because he wanted you to decide how and when to help them. From behind the front door, muffled voices could be heard. Jason and Emily arguing about something, unaware of the conversation unfolding outside. And neighbors were no longer pretending not to stare. Someone whispered, "Is that a lawyer?" Another muttered, "What's going on?" Jason finally opened the door, annoyed. "What is this?" he demanded, stepping onto the porch. "Who are you?" Emily appeared behind him, arms folded. Daniel turned, his expression professional but edged with steel. "I'm Daniel Pierce," he said, "your late father's attorney." Jason's face shifted. "Our what?" Emily frowned. "Dad had a lawyer?" "Yes," Daniel replied, "and he trusted me to ensure his wishes were respected, which they currently are not." Jason scoffed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Daniel held up the deed. "This house," he said clearly, loud enough for the entire porch and half the neighbors to hear, "belongs to Miss Margaret Dawson. Legally, completely. It is her property. You," he looked between Jason and Emily, "just kicked the rightful owner out of her own home." Emily's face drained of color. Jason's jaw fell open. That's not possible," he stammered. "We checked." "Actually," Daniel cut in, "what you did was attempt to coerce her into signing away her rights without full understanding. That falls under financial manipulation, probably elder abuse, depending on how far you went." The words hit like blows. Several neighbors murmured. One gasped loudly. Margaret stood in the middle, still trembling, clutching the suitcase handle in one hand and the envelope from Terrence in the other. Jason's voice rose, panicked. "We didn't. We wouldn't. It's not like that." Emily stepped down onto the path. "Mom," she said quickly, voice suddenly soft, sugar-sweet. "You know we love you. We were just overwhelmed. We thought—" Daniel held up his hand. "Stop," he said firmly. "I've seen this before. Panic doesn't rewrite what you did." Jason turned to Margaret, eyes wide, desperate. "Mom, put the suitcase down," he pleaded. "Come back inside. We can talk." Margaret looked at both of them, really looked. For the first time, she saw not just her babies, but the people they had chosen to be today. People who lied, who stole, who tried to throw her away when they thought she was powerless. Her voice, when it came, was soft but steady. "You threw me out," she whispered, without a second thought. Jason's eyes glossed over. "We made a mistake," Emily added quickly. "We were just stressed. The bills, the house, we thought—" "You thought I was in your way," Margaret said, tears spilling freely now. "You thought I was just weight on your shoulders." She glanced at Daniel. "Mr. Pierce," she said quietly, "you're sure about this? The house? The money?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. It is all yours." The suitcase handle slipped from her grip. For the first time that day, Margaret stopped feeling like someone being pushed out. She started feeling like someone standing on her own ground. And for Jason and Emily, the storm had only just begun. For a moment, Time just hung there. Margaret standing in the yard, grief and shock swirling across her face. Jason and Emily on the porch, suddenly small in the doorway they'd just used to push her out. Daniel holding the documents like a quiet hammer of truth. Around them, Maple Street watched. No one was pretending anymore. Phones were out. Curtains were half open. A few neighbors even stepped onto their porches, arms crossed, waiting to see what would happen next. Jason's voice cracked first. "Mom, please," he said, stepping toward her. "We didn't mean it like that. We thought, you thought I was in the way," Margaret said, her voice gentle but cut with hurt. "You thought all I had left to give you was this house." Emily swallowed, eyes shiny. "We were scared," she said. "We're drowning in bills, and you're always stressed, and we thought if we handled the house, things would get better." "By throwing me out?" Margaret asked. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. There was no way to dress it up. That's when a familiar voice boomed from down the sidewalk. "Margaret?" All heads turned. Pastor Leonard Green walked toward them, his tall frame steady and his face a mix of concern and barely controlled anger. He wore a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up as if he'd left something unfinished to rush over. "Leonard," Margaret breathed, wiping at her cheeks quickly. You didn't have to come. Your neighbor called me," he said, nodding toward Carol Reagan, watching nearby with arms wrapped over her robe. "Said something wasn't right over here." He took in the scene, the suitcase, the papers, the stunned attorney, the guilty kids, the watching neighbors. "What in God's name is going on?" he asked, his gaze landing heavily on Jason and Emily. Jason looked at the ground. Emily fidgeted with her sleeves. Daniel stepped forward slightly. "Pastor Green, I'm Daniel Pierce," he said. "I represent the late Mr. Dawson. I was delivering information to Ms. Dawson regarding a trust and property ownership when I arrived. Apparently, we made a mistake," he said. "We didn't know about any trust. We thought Dad left nothing. We thought we were stuck in this house, broke forever." Emily jumped in quickly. "We're just tired, Pastor," she said. "We're stressed all the time. We wanted control of something. Mom's always hovering, and you decided the answer," Leonard cut in, "was to take the roof from over the head of the woman who gave you one?" Emily blinked back tears. "You don't understand," she said. "You weren't here for everything." His eyes softened for the briefest moment. "Oh, I understand more than you think," he said. "I saw this woman come to church after double shifts, with sleep in her eyes and love in her hands. I saw her bringing you two in here when you were too little to even spell respect, and she taught you what it meant." He turned to Margaret. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. "They tried to put you out?" Margaret swallowed. "Yes," she whispered. "They packed my suitcase, told me the house wasn't mine, told me they owe me nothing." Pastor Green took a slow breath, steadying himself. He looked at Jason and Emily again, no longer with shock, but with deep disappointment that cut deeper than shouting ever could. "You two ought to be ashamed of yourselves," he said, voice low but ringing. Jason squeezed his eyes shut. "We know," he said. "We messed up. No," Leonard said. "You didn't just mess up. You betrayed her. Intentionally. Publicly." The word publicly hung there, heavy, undeniable. Across the street, someone lowered their phone, guilt flitting across their face for recording, but not stepping in. Daniel cleared his throat gently. "If I may," he said, glancing at Margaret. "Ms. Dawson, I know this is a lot, but we do have decisions to make regarding the trust and the property." Margaret took a breath. Trust? Pastor Green asked. Daniel nodded. Her husband left a substantial trust in her name, he said. In addition to this house and a separate small rental property, she's financially secure, more than her children ever knew, and certainly more than they told her. The neighbors gasped again. Jason stared at his mother, stunned. A rental property? Emily's eyes widened. Wait, what? Margaret shook her head slowly. I didn't know, she said. Terrence never told me. I thought we were just surviving. Daniel held up the envelope again. He wanted you to live your later years comfortable, he said. Not hustling, not scraping by. And he wanted you to be the one who decided how much to help your kids based on how they treated you. Margaret stared at that envelope like it was a new heartbeat in her chest. Jason's voice broke. Mom, we didn't know, he said. We thought you were holding out on us, like you didn't want us to have anything. Margaret's eyes flashed with a rare, angry spark. And so your answer, she said, her voice shaking, was to take everything you thought I had and throw me out? Jason flinched. Emily's eyes filled with tears. We were wrong, Emily choked out. We were so wrong. We thought if we controlled the house, we'd finally be free. Free from what? Margaret asked. From the woman who fed you, paid for your school supplies, worked her body into pain so you could have clean clothes and Christmas presents? Emily wiped her face roughly. From the guilt, she whispered. Every time you struggled, we felt like we were failing you. And instead of helping, we blamed you. I'm not saying it makes sense, but she looked small now. Not cold, not cruel, just broken in her own way. Jason stepped closer to Margaret, hands open, empty. Mom, I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm so sorry. I can't even look at myself right now. The apology was real. Margaret could hear it, but so was the hurt. So was the memory of them dragging her suitcase to the porch like she was a stranger. Pastor Green stepped beside Margaret, placing a large, steady hand gently on her shoulder. You don't owe anyone an instant answer, he said to her. Not after what they did. She nodded, grateful for the anchor. Daniel cleared his throat again. For now, he said, what matters is this. You are the legal owner of this house. If you wish to remain here, you have every right. If you wish to ask them to leave, you have every right. And the trust will start dispersing funds starting today. Jason and Emily both looked panicked. Leave? Jason echoed, voice small. You're not kicking us out, are you? Margaret inhaled slowly. Every cell in her body wanted to scream at them, to throw their bags outside like they did hers, to hurt them the way their words had stabbed her. But she didn't. She was tired. She was wounded, but she was still their mother. She looked at them with a sorrowful calm. I'm not going to decide anything right here in this yard, she said softly. Not in front of everybody who just watched you throw me away. Several neighbors shifted, shame creeping into their faces. She straightened her back. I'm going to sit with Pastor Leonard. I'm going to read what your father left. I'm going to talk to God. And when I know in my spirit what I'm supposed to do, then I'll decide. Jason nodded slowly, tears slipping down. Emily sniffled. Can we at least talk later? Margaret looked at her. You've been talking, she said quietly. Your actions spoke loud. Emily's shoulders crumpled. Margaret turned to Daniel. Mr. Pierce, she said, I'd like to go over those papers somewhere quiet. He nodded. Of course, Miss Dawson. We can meet at my office or Pastor Green's church if you'd like. She looked at Leonard. Church, she said softly. Feels right. Leonard gave her a small nod. I'll drive. Before she left, Margaret turned one last time to the house, her house. Lock my door, Jason, she said. Until I get back, nobody goes through my things." He nodded instantly. "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." That ma'am hit different now. Not obligation, not dismissal. Respect, fear, maybe both. She picked up the suitcase, lighter now somehow, and walked to Pastor Green's car with Daniel at her side. As she got in, Carol Reagan called out from her porch. "Margaret?" She turned. "You're not alone, honey," Carol said. "You hear me? Not after everything you've done for them." Margaret smiled weakly. "Thank you, Carol," she said. The car door closed. As they pulled away, Jason and Emily stood in the doorway, the very spot where just minutes ago they'd thought they were pushing out a burden. Now they realized they'd almost thrown away their entire world. And everyone on Maple Street? They'd seen exactly who was who. The church office smelled of old paper and lemon polish. The kind of smell that wrapped around you like a memory you didn't know you missed. Margaret sat at the small wooden table, the trust documents spread out in front of her like pages of a life she never knew she had. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced her late husband's name. Daniel sat across from her, patient, calmly answering each question. Pastor Green stood near the window, arms folded, watching her with the protective presence of someone who wished he could shield her from every hurt that had ever touched her. It took nearly an hour to go through everything. The trust, the rental property, the savings account, the insurance payout she never knew existed. By the time she finished reading, her chest felt heavy, not with fear, but with something stranger. Something like worth. Worth she had not felt in years. Finally, she exhaled slowly and slid the last paper back into the folder. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce," she said softly. "I think I know what I need to do now." Daniel gave her a respectful nod. "If you need anything, legal, financial, emotional support, please call me. Your husband made sure you'd always have help." Pastor Green picked up the folder and held it out to her. "You ready?" he asked gently. Margaret didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded. They drove back to the house in silence, headlights sliding across familiar streets. Streets she'd walked with her kids when they were little. Streets where their laughter once sounded brighter than summer. She never imagined she'd return home feeling like a stranger in her own life. When the car pulled into her driveway, the porch light was on. Jason and Emily stood there waiting, side by side. Both looked worn down, eyes swollen, guilt heavy on their faces. They didn't speak as she walked past them. They waited, hoping, begging without words. Inside, the house was too quiet, too clean, too tense. It felt like a stage, everyone waiting for the curtain to rise on the part none of them wanted to play. Margaret took her time removing her coat, folding it carefully over the back of the couch. Pastor Green stood behind her like a silent wall of strength. Once she was steady, she turned. Jason swallowed first. "Mom, can we talk?" Emily stepped forward quickly, desperate. "Mom, please, we were scared. We thought you didn't trust us. We thought—" Margaret raised her hand. Both kids fell silent like children again. She looked around the room, taking it all in. The house she cleaned, the meals she cooked, the nights she stayed up doing fever checks, the bills she paid alone, the love she poured into every corner of this place. Then she looked at them, really looked. "Sit down," she said. They obeyed instantly. Margaret walked slowly to the coffee table, her fingers brushing the places where crayons had once scribbled, where Jason broke a vase and cried because he thought she'd be angry, where Emily used to sit braiding her hair before school. She turned toward them again. And finally, she let her heart speak. "I raised you," she said quietly. "Not because I had to, not because somebody forced me, but because I loved you. I chose you. Every day." Jason nodded, tears already falling. Margaret continued, her voice trembling but steady. "I worked myself into exhaustion so you never felt hunger. I went without new clothes so you could have nice ones. When bills came up short, I cried in the bathroom so you wouldn't see me break." Emily covered her mouth, sobbing silently. "And do you know what hurt me most tonight?" Margaret asked. They looked up, both afraid. Jason whispered, "Kicking you out?" "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "What hurt most was knowing that you believed, even for 1 second, that I was disposable." Emily choked out, "Mom, we just—" "You did," Margaret said softly, but firmly. "You packed my suitcase. You opened that door. You told me I wasn't your real mother. You said you owed me nothing." Jason dropped his face into his hands. Emily cried harder. Margaret let silence fall, heavy and necessary. "I gave you everything I had," she said. "My time, my love, my youth, my strength." Then she looked at them with a calm that cut deeper than shouting ever could. "And when you thought I had nothing left to give, you threw me away." Jason's shoulders shook. Emily slid off the couch to her knees. "Mom, please, please forgive us," Emily sobbed. "We were wrong. We were selfish. We were stupid. We thought you were just holding us back." Margaret's chest cracked at that. "Holding you back?" she repeated softly. "I've been holding you up your entire lives." Jason stood, moving toward her slowly like a child afraid of the dark. "Mom, you're right," he whispered. "We failed you. I failed you, and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging for another chance." Margaret stepped back. "I'm not making decisions while my heart is broken," she said. "I need time. I need space. And I need you both to understand that trust isn't something you get back just because you want it." They nodded again, tearfully. Pastor Green finally spoke from behind her. "You heard your mother," he said. "You can't undo what happened today, but you can choose who you're going to be from here on out." Margaret picked up the trust folder. "I'm not throwing you out," she said. "I'm not unloving you. But everything changes now." Jason wiped his face. "What do you want us to do?" he asked. Margaret looked at him with a long, heavy stare. "Earn back my respect," she said. "Because love is a gift, but respect? That comes from how you treat people." Emily cried into her hands. "We will, Mom. We promise." Margaret turned to the hallway. "I'm going to bed," she said quietly. "We'll talk again in the morning." But as she walked down the hall, her children called her one last time. "Mom," Jason said softly. She paused. "We love you." It was raw, broken, true. It didn't undo anything, but it was a beginning. Margaret nodded once, tears finally spilling over. "I know." And she closed her bedroom door, not to shut them out, but to finally let herself breathe. Morning sunlight spilled into the kitchen like it didn't know a storm had torn through the house the night before. The brightness felt almost wrong, too gentle for the heaviness sitting in the air. Margaret emerged from her bedroom slowly, the trust folder tucked under her arm, her steps steady, controlled. She hadn't slept much, but both of them looked exhausted, eyes red, faces pale with dread. For the first time in a long time, they looked like children, waiting to hear a truth they couldn't escape. Margaret sat at the head of the table, a place she had never chosen for herself before. Pastor Green and attorney Daniel Pierce arrived moments later. taking seats on either side of her, not as guards, but as quiet pillars of support. Jason swallowed hard. "Mom, we're so sorry," he whispered. "We didn't sleep. We couldn't." Emily nodded, tears sliding down before she could wipe them. "We don't expect you to forgive us overnight. We just want to fix this." Margaret held up a hand gently. "I'm not here to punish you," she said. "I'm here to protect myself." The siblings lowered their heads. Daniel opened the trust folder and began laying papers in front of her. "As we discussed last night," he said calmly, "these documents ensure you have complete control of your home, finances, and assets. No one else has legal access unless you choose to grant it." Emily leaned forward. "Mom, we never wanted your money. We just thought—" "Emily," Margaret said softly, "you wanted control. Those are not the same thing." Emily broke again. Jason clenched his fists like he wanted to punch himself. Daniel continued, his tone respectful but firm. "We will be updating your will, your emergency contacts, your property deeds, your bank authorizations, and your trust beneficiaries." Margaret nodded slowly. "Good." Jason's voice came out cracked. "So, what about us?" The question he had feared asking since last night. She turned to look at him fully. "You are my children," she said, "but you will no longer have access to my accounts. Not one credit card, not one signature, not one decision that affects my home or—" Jason pressed his hands to his forehead. Emily whispered, "We understand." But Margaret wasn't finished. "You will not demand anything from me," she said. "Not money, not help, not favors. You will not speak to me like I'm a burden, and you will not, ever, try to put me out of my own home again." The siblings nodded frantically, sobbing harder. Pastor Green placed a hand over hers. "And in return," he said softly, "they'll have a chance to rebuild, with honesty and action, not empty words." Margaret exhaled slowly. "I'm not cutting you out of my life," she said, "but I am cutting you off from hurting me." Silence. Heavy, painful, necessary. Daniel then slid a new document forward. "One more thing," he said. "Any attempt to manipulate you, pressure you, financially exploit you, or threaten you will legally remove both of them from any inheritance." Jason shook his head quickly. "Mom, I swear, we'll never do anything like that again." Emily wiped her face with trembling fingers. "We just want our mother back, that's all." Margaret softened, only slightly. "Then you have to earn me back," she said quietly. "Not through gifts or apologies, but through who you become." The weight of her words sank deep into the room. Finally, Daniel packed up his files. "Everything is in order," he told her. "You're protected now." He left with a respectful nod. Pastor Green remained long enough to give Margaret a warm, anchoring hug. "Proud of you," he said gently. "You found your voice." She smiled faintly, tired but relieved. When he left, only the three of them remained. Jason stood first. "Mom, please, let us do something, anything, for you." Margaret hesitated, then walked to her calendar pinned on the fridge. She circled the upcoming Saturday. "There's a volunteer shift at the community center," she said. "They need help organizing donations." I signed up. Emily blinked in confusion. "Okay." Margaret met their eyes. "If you want to rebuild trust," she said, "you'll meet me there. Not to impress me, not to earn points, but to serve people who have less than you." Jason nodded instantly. Emily did too. "We'll be there," Emily whispered. Margaret grabbed her purse and coat. "For now," she said, "I'm going to stay in a small apartment Pastor Green found for me." I need space. Both kids tensed, fear in their eyes. But they didn't argue. Mom, Jason said quietly, we'll respect whatever you need, and we'll show up every time. Emily added through tears, thank you for giving us even one more chance. Margaret walked to the door, pausing in the doorway as her children watched her. Then she stepped outside. For the first time in years, she felt the sun warm her face without the weight of someone else's shadows. Her children remained inside the doorway, watching her leave, not abandoned, but humbled, not cast aside, but being asked to rise. And for the first time in their lives, they intended to. Evening settled over the city like a soft blanket, quiet and warm. The community center glowed with soft yellow light through the windows, the kind of warmth that made people feel welcome long before they walked inside. Margaret stood outside the building, watching families come and go, volunteers carrying boxes, children laughing as they ran across the sidewalk. This place had saved her more times than she could count, not because it solved her problems, but because it reminded her she wasn't alone in trying. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders as a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh bread from the kitchen inside. Pastor Green always said, where there's work, there's hope. She believed him tonight more than ever. Inside, she found a quiet corner near a bulletin board full of handwritten notes from volunteers. She read one. Thank you for helping me believe I'm worth something. Her heart tugged. She wasn't the only one learning that lesson again. She took a seat, letting her thoughts flow. Not heavy, but real. For the first time in decades, she wasn't running a household, fixing others' mistakes or carrying burdens she didn't create. She wasn't patching wounds her children dealt her with careless words. She wasn't shrinking to keep peace. She was breathing. Full breaths, deep breaths, breaths that belonged to her. Her voice echoed softly in her mind, almost like a narration of her own life. Blood didn't make us a family. Love did. But love without respect is slavery. She thought of Jason and Emily. Their guilt, their tears, their sudden panic when the truth came out. Not about the money, but about how they had treated the woman who raised them. Once upon a time, they were toddlers, hugging her legs, crying for her comfort. Then, teenagers, slamming doors, testing boundaries. Then adults who forgot the hands that fed them. She blamed herself sometimes, wondering if she'd loved them too much, or protected them too often, or forgiven them too quickly. But Pastor Green reminded her, children learn from your heart, but they grow from their choices. Tonight, she held on to that. The door creaked open behind her. She turned, and there they were. Jason and Emily stood side by side, holding boxes of canned goods they volunteered to sort. Both dressed simply, no pride, no performance, just quiet determination. They looked so different tonight. Not entitled, not demanding, not self-assured. Just humble and ready. Emily approached first. We didn't want to bother you inside, she whispered, so we waited until the shift was over. Jason nodded, shifting the weight of the donation box in his hands. We came early, he said. We helped clean storage, and we're coming again on Wednesday and Saturday, and whenever they need. Margaret's eyes softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but softening. Emily swallowed. Mom, we're learning. Slowly, but we're learning. Jason stepped forward, voice cracking. We want to be worthy of you again. Margaret looked at them, the two souls she had raised with every ounce of strength she had, the two who had broken her heart without understanding its cost. But now, they were trying to mend what they had shattered. She reached out and touched their hands gently, not pulling them close, not pushing them away, just touching, just acknowledging. "That's all I asked for," she whispered. "Not perfection, not money, not promises." She paused, letting the moment breathe. Just respect. Jason lowered his head in shame. Emily wiped tears before they fell. Margaret stepped back and smiled. Small, tired, but real. "The rest will take time," she said. "Trust grows slower than love, and heals slower than hurt." Neither sibling argued, neither begged. They simply nodded, accepting the truth she had earned the right to speak. As they walked with her to the door, she glanced up at the sky, wide open, full of stars she hadn't noticed in years. And her voice, soft, reflective, and steady, narrated the truth she had finally embraced. Sometimes losing everything you take for granted is the only way to learn its value. She stepped outside, the night air cool on her cheeks. Her children walked beside her, not leaning on her, not pulling her down, just walking with her. For the first time in a very long time, they were becoming a family again. Not by blood, not by convenience, not by entitlement, but by choice.